This is my next contribution to New Zealand's super diverse future. The status quo is not sustainable. Superdiversity stocktake, which I would talk to you about now, is designed to help us to adapt to a super diverse New Zealand. To make sure that we are fit for the future. Because New Zealand is super diverse right now. Predominantly in Auckland, but actually throughout New Zealand. Here, we are already 50% Maori, Pacific and Asian, 44% are not born in New Zealand. And we have over 200 ethnicities. Now, the definition academically of superdiversity is 25% are born in New Zealand, 100 ethnicities. So we are almost doubled that number already. And Auckland will continue to become younger and browner as Anglo-Saxon population ages and shrinks. So, the megatrend here is not age. And the megatrend here is not urbanization. The megatrend is demography. It's ethnicity. And we need to get our head around that because most of the benefits from superdiversity that we, as a country, are enjoying at the moment, such as great renovation, productivity, and investment, increase New Zealand's financial capital, whereas the most of the challenges from superdiversity adversely affect New Zealand's social capital. However, if you don't mitigate the challenges to your social capital, you are not going to maximize sustainably the diversity dividing benefits for your financial capital. My name is Graham Virgo. I'm Professor of English Private Law in the Faculty of Law at the University of Cambridge, and I'm going to consider the question why you should study law if you don't want to become a lawyer. A lot of people who study law at university do so because they want to become practicing lawyers, whether barristers or solicitors. But it is not necessary to read law at university to become a practicing lawyer. Equally, studying law at university is a legitimate subject for academic study even if you definitely do not want to become a lawyer or think that you may not become a practicing lawyer. That is, because the study of law at university is not a vocational subject. It is an academic subject and an intellectual discipline. Even those students who study law at university intending to become practicing lawyers are required to do additional vocational training to prepare them for working either as a barrister or a solicitor. For them, the study of law at university by itself is not sufficient to train them to become lawyers. So why do such students study law at university, and why do others study law even if they don't want to become a lawyer? The answer is fairly similar in both cases, namely that studying law at university trains the student to think and write logically and clearly. Interest in music in the mind is as ancient as philosophy itself. Plato was marveled at the power of music over human character and human emotions. In fact, he was quite concerned about the way music could either degrade or elevate the minds of young people. So you can see, in some sense, nothing has changed. He said, rhythm and harmony find their ways into the inward places of soul. Well, yes, that's true, and he said this in 400 BC. But what has changed since then? It's just in the last few years, brain science has started to seriously investigate music, and this young science is confirming music's power over us. For example, some colleagues in Montreal decided to do a study to investigate what happens in the brain when people get chills to music. This is intense emotional responses that often manifest themselves as shivers, tingling of the spines. Anybody here had this? Okay, it's not uncommon, and they specifically looked at chills, instrumental music. So this wasn't due to any associations that people had with lyrics. It was just sounds of music and they looked it. They look advantage of the fact that people often know quite well what music gives them chills. They know piece, sometimes the very passage in the piece, and so they had people bring in their own self-selected CDs and they scanned their brains while they were having these experiences listening to music. It seems to me that architecture is very much something that causes us both pleasure and trouble. I live in the part of Western London where I think many of the streets where I live are really ugly, and this distresses me every time I walk to a supermarket or walk to a tube. I think, why did they build that and terribly without architecture? It lasts so long. And if you write a bad book or do a bad play, I will be shocked when it be showed, and then no one would suffer. A bad building has a serious impact could be hundreds of years on the people around it, and suppose the book arose a little bit from the frustration, almost anger, then there is so much bad architecture around. And then I realize if you talk about architecture, you will say, why buildings are not more beautiful? Then you will say I can use such work as beauty, that's really arrogant word. And no one knows what beautiful is. It's all in the eye of beholder. I couldn't help but think that actually. Well, you know that we all attempt to agree that Rome is nice than Milky Kings, and San Francisco has the edge of Frankfurt, so we can make that sort of generalization. Surely there are some things we can say about why a building works or why it doesn't. So the books really attempt to suggest why architecture works when it does, and what might going to be wrong when it doesn't work. Well, I would argue that what they will say was the most important thing to happen in the early 21st century was the merger of globalization and the IT revolution. The two really fused, in a way that more and more IT started to drive more and more globalization. And more globalization started to drive more and more IT. And what that fusion did was take the world from connected to hyperconnected and from interconnected to interdependent. These are huge differences of degree that are differences in kind. It happened over the last decade. You are all feeling it in your jobs, in your universities, in your schools. But no one is really explaining to people. Everyone's living this fusion now. The plumbing of the world fundamentally changed in the last 10 years.